So then after we get out of this, we get out of the orchards, then we get from one place to another, we get into the hedgerows, and we call them the damned hedgerows. Hedgerows, we never had any thing to do with hedgerows. We never practiced working hedgerows and that, and I don't know why, but we didn't. But the hedgerows in France are probably 8, 10, 12 feet thick and about 10 or 12 feet high. And they are so thick and so old that our tanks wouldn't go through them. They were just, and I don't know what kind of wood they are, what they were, but if you tried to cut them with an axe, I didn't, but some of the guys told me that they tried to chop through them with an axe, and it was like trying to cut a rubber hose. You just couldn't do them. So we got the brass. At that time, someone says, "Does anybody, guys, where we can get some TNT?" And I said, "Yeah, we got a truck following us with ammunition, and we got a couple of cases of TNT in there." He says, "Go get some." I said, "Okay." So I went down and I went back a quarter of a mile, I guess. Went back and I found the truck and I got about 10 or 15 of those little TNT canisters, about that big around, about that high, with a hole in the top for a detonator, all that. And I had done some detonating work in England, and I wish I hadn't, because that made me a quick fix. So they says, "Okay, anybody know anything about TNT?" And I did. So he says, "Well, let's see if we can blow a hole in this hedge." He says, "Okay." So we went and we dug holes about, maybe 4 or 5 inches across and a couple of feet deep, and we put these 3 or 4 holes about 3 feet apart, and we set those down there, and we put the detonators in already, and so when we got all ready, we says, "Okay, let her go," and you're supposed to holler, "Fire in a hole," or "Get the hell out of the way," or something, So anyhow, we said, "Fire in the hole," and I pulled the plunger for them, and kaboom, and all we heard was kaboom, like that, and shook the leaves a little bit. About that was it, and that was all that we could do with that. So that was the end of that. So they, I don't know where they got a hold of it, but somebody got there were some tankers around there, and a tank dozer. They found a tank dozer. Now a tank dozer is a regular tank with a bulldozer blade on the front. So they found one someplace. He was in with the rest of them, 4th Armored, I think they were. So they come over, and he says, "Can you do anything?" He says, "Yeah, we can get it through." So they pull up, and they drop these what they call steel teeth. They drop them down 10 or 12 inches into the roots, jam them in, and then pulled up on them 2 or 3 times, and they pulled them loose. Well, they got a hole big enough after a while that the tank could get through. So then that made it even worse for us, because as the tank got through, the communications wasn't good. And as the tank went through the fence or through the hedge, he didn't stop. He went up to the next hedge. Well, we followed him out of that hedgerow, but the Germans were in the next hedgerow. So they were waiting for us. And we got halfway across this little field, and they had us out in the open. Well, we dove under that tank and everything else, and of course, we lost probably half the guys that were with us. I got nicked in the head, just enough to shave my hair, and so we couldn't. That wouldn't work. So then we thought, well, we can't do this. So after they pushed the Germans back just a little bit, then the infantry was there with me and those other guys, and so we says, well, let's get a couple of mortars up here. So we did. We got a couple of mortars, small mortars, but they were mortars. So in the next row behind where the Germans were, we just zero in on that next hedgerow and this field. So they did. They threw a couple in there to tell where they were at. So then the tanks waited, and when they got all set up, then the tanks went through these holes that they'd built, that they dug, and they went through, And as they got through, then of course the Germans got up and ran. Well, that was good because they ran from the hedgerow that they were in to the hedgerow behind them, and that field in between those two, we had our mortars tuned in on those. So as soon as those guys started to move, we started dropping mortars. Man, those Germans, parts flying in every direction. We got a lot, and after a couple of times of that, the Germans picked up and moved, and then they got out of it, and that saved us a lot of lives because we lost some boys in that too. So then, after we get out of the hedgerows, we get on, then we come into these village after village, and these little farm villages, probably anywhere from 5 or 6 houses to 26 houses. They're just small villages. And the farmers would live in the village, but they were farming the land. So we got ready then, and we says, well, we're going to have to go from town to town now. Well, the French people that lived in these towns got the idea that they hung bed sheets out their upstairs windows. And those bed sheets, when we come into a town, and we were told that these bed sheets showed that the Germans had gone. This was, if there are no bed sheets, don't go in because the Germans are still there. So then we said, well, what are you going to do now? So we're sitting there getting ready, and finally, because we had to be cautious on this, because the Germans could put some white sheets up there, draw us in, and good night, Irene. So anyhow, we would send a recon vehicle anyhow, and if we went in there and didn't get shot at and didn't see anything, then he would come back and say okay, and it's clear, and we would go in, and the town is ours for then. Sometimes you get 1 or 2 towns a day, sometimes none. I remember this one time. We come to this town, and there were no sheets out on the windows. So we thought, well, we got to get a recon in here or a tank, whichever one we had. And if we didn't have a recon vehicle or a tank, then we would go in with a half track. We'd go in and see if we couldn't draw a little fire and see if the Germans were in there. Well, we were getting ready, and there was a recon there. Somebody had a recon, and so it's just like that tank in DeKalb. That's not a tank; it's a recon vehicle. So because of that 37 millimeter weapon. So this, they came. We told them what we wanted, and they said, "Okay, we'll go in and we'll go on and recon it for you, and just hold right there." So we said, he left, and he went into town, and we figured about 20 minutes at the most, and he should be out of there. So time came and time went, and we couldn't understand the guy wasn't coming back, and we didn't hear any shooting, so he was all right, but maybe he got waylaid, and so now what are we going to do? So I said, well, if he don't come back in 5 minutes, we're going to go and get him. We got to. We got to go get him. So we were standing around waiting, and I no more than got that out of my mouth. Then I looked down the road, and one of the guys started jumping up and down and laughing. And here come this recon vehicle out of this town, coming up the road, coming like the dickens. And he come up to where we were, and he stopped, and that was the darndest mess you ever seen. Up on the top of this tank, they had about a dozen chickens tied to the top of this tank. Of course, we says, where you been? And they were in stealing chickens. And we're sitting out here waiting for them. So anyhow, and not only chickens, they had about a dozen chickens in there, but they also had a 150-pound hog tied to their artillery piece. And as they were coming up the road, what a sight that was. They were coming up there 25, 30 miles an hour, and the chickens were cackling and making a noise, and the feathers were flying, and that pig was grunting and groaning and moaning. What a hell of a mess that was.